You know, it's honestly hard to even wrap my head around the fact that I have had the Galaxy Z Fold 4 for over 100 days now. This thing came out August 25th of 2022, and that is effectively when I got the thing. So as you can imagine, after 100 days owning a device and using it quite a bit, I daily drove it for a good chunk of that, and I still pick this thing up and use it every single day. You can imagine I probably have more than my fair share of thoughts on this device. And in this video, that's what we're going to cover. This is a 100 plus day review of the Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 4. And I think we should start this thing off in what I think is a fairly logical place. We should take a look at the device itself. Now, I have primarily had a case on this device, but we'll talk about how it's held up after 100 days without the case. And then I'll show you the case really quickly too, just so that you can see how that's gone as well. Long story short is it's absolutely immaculate. Granted, I'm pretty like soft on my devices. Like I don't really break phones. There's a little bit of adhesive, if I can speak, there's a little bit of adhesive there on the bottom, but I go pretty light on my phones. I don't break my phones. I don't break my devices. And so that's, been par for the course here. You can probably tell here as I move it around, no obvious scratching on the external screen. If we open it up, the tablet display is similarly pristine. Now, there is a screen protector on this internal screen, but it looks totally fine. There's no issues at all. This thing is held up really, really well. It feels so solid and so premium in the hand. Really have nothing negative to say about the hardware. I used this case for a little while. You got the little grip to hold on, little kickstand stuck back there of my own, and it's held up really well. Some of the adhesive on the inside here has wanted to peel off on some of these. Here's a good example. There should be a bit of adhesive there, and it is gone. And down here, I believe there was supposed to be one as well, and it is also gone. The one I've used the most, though, has been this case, and I've actually not had the S Pen on there much at all lately. I've opted for kickstand and sleek strip, so kind of getting me to the same place as what I was doing here, but just with a thinner form factor, and it has held up really well also. But overall, the hardware itself has held up really, really well. You can see the crease here is definitely visible, right? In particular, when the screen is off and you're looking straight down at it, it is very visible. If I unlock the device, though, the crease does disappear, okay? Like if you're off axis, yeah, you're gonna be able to see it again, but staring straight on it, it's really not something that's noticeable. You can feel it. It definitely does dip in there. And, has that gotten worse over time, being open and closed? It's definitely possible. My Fold 2 did seem to get worse over time, so I would imagine that this is going to do the same. But it wasn't bad to begin with. Honestly, comparing it to something like the Oppo Find N that's way less noticeable, sure, it is a bit of a problem. But in the grand scheme of things, to me, it's not that big of a deal. I'm not really all that bothered by it. Honestly, I'm way more bothered by the under-display camera, which on lighter backgrounds has a shimmering effect that for people like myself that are kind of photosensitive can cause a lot of problems. And the current build of GoodLock on the One UI beta that I'm running will not fill that with black like I'm used to doing. So that's probably, like, honestly, that's the biggest reason I've not used it as much over the last couple of weeks, because I just haven't been able to fill that with black. And that's honestly the biggest problem. Let's talk about the cameras on this thing, because I think that the cameras are actually like really underrated. If we jump over here to GSM Arena, we can look at the camera specs. We do have a 50 megapixel primary. That's your main camera. It has 1 micrometer pixels, which are very good. 10 megapixel telephoto, which is at 3x optical. We'll touch on that in just a moment. And then a 12 megapixel ultra wide, which is also quite solid. And like I said, I just generally feel like the camera is pretty underrated. A lot of people thought that the Fold 2 and the Fold 3 camera, they weren't very good. I kind of disagreed. They're a little oversaturated at times, but broadly speaking, I do think it does a pretty good job, and the Fold 4 does take a step up over those cameras. Let's look at a few samples now. Primary camera here with that large sensor size does a good job of giving you some blur without needing to use portrait mode. The details are fairly solid as well. Colors are saturated, but not, to the point that it's like wildly unrealistic. But if you do want to use portrait mode, it does a really good job. Like I said before, details, colors are good. That focus fall off is really solid. And at times, I feel like you can grab some really like outstanding photos using this thing with this portrait mode. You can also get up really nice and close using the Pro mode, set a manual focus, zoom in a little bit, and who needs a macro mode on their device when you can just do this? Look at how close I was able to get and still remain in focus. Really, really cool. The ultra wide looks good as well. Lots of contrast, nice punchy colors, just really solid overall. Let's look at the telephoto now. This is a pretty good example here. So we're back on the ultra wide, and you probably can't see anything here in the middle of the screen. If I go to the standard lens, you can see that there is a heron or a crane. I'm not actually sure which one this is. And then let's zoom in, and hey, you can get pretty close to this thing, and it looks fairly solid. Is this Pixel 7 Pro or S22 Ultra level zoom? No, it's not, but it's more than serviceable. And in fact, I was able to get all the way in this far, and you can pretty well tell what we're looking at here. Shutter lag also isn't too bad. I mean, if it was, I don't think this would be in as good a focus as it is. Here's a more normal shot using that telephoto lens that isn't zoomed in quite as crazy far. And I think you can see here that it does a really solid job. And there's one last thing to point out here, and that's the moon shots. I mean, that is absolutely outstanding for a 3x optical zoom taken in my backyard handheld. What more could you possibly want from this thing's camera? It's absolutely rock solid. You've got pro mode, you got all these cool features. I'm not going to go over everything, but there's like portrait blur in videos. There's lots of really good stuff. And honestly, the software experience has been just as good for me. There are a few bugs I've seen here and there, but nothing show-stopping at all. In general, this thing is very, very fast. It's very, very smooth. Let's look at this home screen here. We've got this 120 hertz panel here on the cover display. I do wish I could scroll this way vertically in my app drawer instead of having to go side to side. That's annoying to go up and then over. We can't seem to find a way to change this in Good Luck. You can change it on other Samsung phones, but not this one. That's annoying. But at any rate, it's very, very performant and smooth. There we go. Let's scroll through that. I mean, it's lightning fast, guys. The Snapdragon 8 Plus Gen 1 is just really, really good. And when you open the thing up and you're in this tablet display, all of that stuff is still true. And if anything, it's even more true than before. I love having the taskbar down here, right? Let's open up an app. And you'll see that the apps down here at the bottom, watch this again, watch these apps here, they shrink down into your taskbar. Not only do you have your taskbar, but you also have your last two apps that you have had open. So I can very quickly go from that into another application, and then I can drag an app up and split screen, and it works really, really well. Look, it's not as good as having an actual dual screen phone because, the gesture navigation is going to respond to the last used app, not the app that you're gesturing on that side of. So there are still some downsides to it, but in terms of like an Android tablet, it's pretty much as close to flawless as you're going to get without really making some big changes to the software under the hood. And there are, of course, some really nice things here that you can mess around with in your settings. If you go into your advanced features and into labs, there's a lot of really cool stuff, which I've gone over in prior videos. But I love the fact that they give you so much control and customization. And then if you do go one step further and download an app like Good Lock, there's even so much more than that. There's so much customization you can do. I think I've customized my always on display. Yes, I have. How cool is that? Some people would say that this device has too much stuff going on. They might call it bloat. And I could see to some degree where that's true. Something like Pixels have, a lot less going on, a lot less to mess with. But at the same time, you could also make a strong argument that it's just a lot of cool stuff that you can mess around with. It's stuff that's optional. You don't have to pay any mind to. It doesn't really slow things down. And it's there if you want it. Now, obviously, the S Pen, that kind of falls into that realm for me. It's there if I want it, but I'm not really going to mess around with it. I don't even carry it with the device anymore. But it is there, and it's good. It's an S Pen. You know how this thing works. It's absolutely solid. Something else I don't do a ton of, but I have, of course, tested a decent amount while using the thing, and I will do occasionally, is gaming. And with this processor, it is going to game as well as anything on the market, and you're going to have a really giant, nice screen to game on. And what I would say are probably the two best speakers of any mobile device on planet Earth. The speakers in this thing are absolutely out of this world. They're fantastic. If we bring the microphone overhead a little bit and crank up the volume on this thing, the bass, the clarity, it's all just solid. What more could you want out of a set of speakers on a mobile device? Do you need to bring a Bluetooth speaker with you? No, you don't. You can set this thing down on a table and it's going to serve that role really, really well. Now, there are a few places that I feel like that the Z Fold kind of fails for me a little bit. I still do think that this cover display is just too skinny, it's too narrow, and it's too tall for me to really like enjoy using. To be frank with you, I can't reach most of this display. I have to use the one-handed mode to be able to really use it one-handed, which duh, that's what it's called. But it's kind of annoying for me, right? It's just a weird aspect ratio. It can make typing a little bit odd sometimes as well. You do get used to it, and after a while, it stops like really bugging you. But if you go away and you come back to it, you're like, man, what is up with this screen? I feel like I'm holding a remote control to a TV. It is a little odd. It's not the end of the world. Some people look at it and go, I would never use that phone. That's terrible. I'm not going to go that far, but I will tell you that I cannot wait for other devices to launch that don't have a screen that is this narrow and this tall. I also do still think that devices like Microsoft's Surface Duo with dual screens do fit my use case better. I like multitasking, and it still is easier on that device. This is the second best multitasking device on the planet in terms of just ease of multitasking and the way that the gestures work and everything. I still think that this is number one, and that does pull me away from it a little bit as well. Another big thing that pulls me away from it is the fact that I have to have a case on it, not for protection, but to have a kickstand, because I am all the time taking this device, putting it into tent mode, and setting it down to watch content. With this device, you have this incredible tablet screen, but if you don't have a kickstand with you, it doesn't really matter. So you're going to have to wear a case, or you're going to have to stick something to the back of it that's going to let it balance and stand up. And frankly, something that can just have multiple postures does tend to fit my use case, again, a little bit better. So it's not the perfect device for me. It's so good. But for me, it does fall just short of being that perfect device for me. I've also talked about another device here like the Pixel 7 Pro that I've long said, well, not long, since I've had it, I've said that if I could not use a Surface Duo, I would use a Z Fold 4, and if I could not use either, I would use a Pixel 7 Pro. I pointed up there because that is actually what is operating as my overhead camera. It works fantastically well for that. So maybe that kind of puts you in the right headspace in terms of like the hierarchy of phones in my mind. I do think that the Z Fold 4 is a phenomenally good device, and we've seen it on sale several times and with some trade-ins. I know some of you have gotten it for incredibly good prices. I think it's absolutely worth it. And the software support seems to be quite good already. Android 13 is here. It's, they've already done their beta with it and everything, which I've covered here. So it seems like software support is going well. Hopefully it continues to go well even after it's, been a year and the Z Fold 5 was on the market, because Samsung does occasionally have a tendency to let, these flagship devices fall by the wayside after a year. Hopefully that does not happen in this instance. But even with that possibly happening, I do still think that the Z Fold 4 is an incredible device. So let's be honest. If you're looking to buy a foldable tablet, for most people, it's the only one that you can get. But I would argue that it's probably still the best one you can get. Now, caveat there being that I've not used these other devices, but I've watched plenty of reviews and I've seen things about them, and most people tend to agree this is the best tablet folding device still on the market. And I think that there's good reason for that. The Samsung software polish, the camera, the hardware, it all comes together to be a really, really great product. Guys, if you're new here, hit that subscribe button before you leave. I'll see you on the next one. And until next time, stay nerdy, my friends.